Before you call me a cheater, answer me this. If another man makes you feel more like a wife than your own husband does, is it really betrayal to follow that feeling? My boss had power, money, confidence, and a wife who looked too comfortable in a life I thought should have been mine. Maybe that sounds cruel, but I was tired of being loyal to a man who made me feel like furniture in my own marriage. So when my boss finally looked at me like I was the woman he wanted, of course I believed I had won. My husband sat across from us that night, folding his napkin slowly, and I smiled because calm men always lose to men who know how to make a woman feel alive. I am Delaney Cole, 33, a senior client relations manager, and of course people like to blame the woman who finally stops pretending a dead marriage is enough. Tell me something first. If your husband pays the bills but stops making you feel like a woman, are you supposed to smile and call that love? I did not want my safe man anymore. I wanted a man who made rooms shift when he walked in. A man whose wife already had the life I thought should have been mine. So when my husband sat across from me that night, slowly folding his napkin like silence could make him stronger, I was sure he was about to understand why I had chosen better. Before Adrian Vale, I would have said my marriage was normal. Not happy in the big way, not painful in the loud way. Normal. Evan and I had been together 8 years and married 6. In our first apartment, we did not even own a real table. We ate takeout on the floor, our backs against the couch, our knees touching over paper boxes of noodles. The heater made a clicking sound every 20 minutes, and Evan used to joke that it was the only thing in the apartment with a stronger work ethic than him. Back then, I liked that kind of man. He was steady, careful, safe. Before big client meetings, he left small notes inside my laptop bag, nothing poetic. Just little things telling me I had prepared. I knew the room, and I did not need to prove myself twice. At that time, it felt like love. Then my life got bigger. My job moved me into glass conference rooms, rooftop mixers, private client dinners, and events where people wore watches that cost more than our first car. I learned how powerful people spoke. I learned how their assistants watched their faces before making decisions. I learned how status had a smell, like expensive perfume, cold champagne, and clean elevator air. Evan did not change with me. That was how I saw it. He still asked if I had eaten. He still checked the tires before my work trips. He still treated a quiet evening like a gift. When I told him I wanted more excitement, he asked if I wanted to plan a weekend away. When I told him I wanted to feel wanted, he said he thought I already knew he loved me. That was Evan's problem. He thought love was something you proved by staying. I wanted to feel it when a man looked at me. Adrian looked. The first time I really saw him, we were at a corporate rooftop mixer downtown. The wind kept lifting the corners of the white tablecloths, and the city lights made the glass railings look blue. I had my silver corporate badge clipped to my dress, even though I did not need it after check-in. I liked the weight of it. I liked how it said I belonged there. Adrian walked through the crowd, and people moved without being asked. He was my boss, yes. But that word felt too small for what he was in that room. He had power in his voice. He had money in the way he stood. He had confidence that did not ask anyone for permission. When he stopped beside me and said my client pitch had been sharper than anyone else's that quarter, I laughed like it was only polite. It was not only polite. For the rest of the night, I kept comparing the feeling. Evan made me feel safe. Adrian made me feel selected. There is a difference. At home, Evan waited up for me at the dining table. He had reheated soup because he said I always forgot to eat at work events. My safe man. My careful man. My man who thought warm soup could compete with being seen by someone like Adrian Vale. He asked how the mixer went. I told him it went well, and I made my voice light so he would not ask too much. He asked if something had changed at work because I seemed different lately. Soft curiosity. No accusation. No fire. Just that careful tone he used when he wanted the truth but did not want to fight for it. I told him confidence looks different on a woman when people finally respect her. He smiled a little, but not enough. Then my phone lit up beside my bowl. Adrian's name appeared after midnight. Evan saw it. He looked at the screen, then at me. His hand moved to the cloth napkin beside his plate. He folded it once, slowly, corner to corner, as if that tiny square needed more attention than his wife getting a message from her boss at that hour. He asked why Adrian was texting me so late. I almost laughed. Not because the question was funny, because it sounded small. I told him real careers did not end at 5, and of course he would not understand that because his work lived in spreadsheets and quiet offices. He said he was only asking. That was the whole problem. He was always only asking, never claiming, never pulling me close, never making me feel like losing me would ruin him. So I took my phone, turned the screen down, and finished my soup like nothing had happened. But something had happened. Not the message, not yet. The change was simpler than that. For the first time, I enjoyed seeing Evan unsure. It made me feel powerful. And the next morning, when I clipped the silver badge back onto my dress and saw Adrian waiting near the glass elevators, I decided I was done feeling guilty for wanting a man who made me feel alive. The next morning, I wore the cream blouse Adrian had once complimented. Of course, I told myself it was for a client review. That was the kind of lie that made me comfortable because it still sounded professional. I had a meeting. I had numbers to explain. I had a room to win. But when I stepped into the elevator and saw Adrian already inside, I knew I had dressed for one person. The elevator lights were cold and blue. His reflection stood behind mine in the metal doors, taller, sharper, calm in a way Evan never managed. Evan's calm made me feel alone. Adrian's calm made me feel chosen. He asked if I had prepared the revised event proposal. I told him I had stayed up late finishing it. He said that was why he trusted me with difficult clients. He said most people wanted approval, but I wanted standards. It was such a small sentence. Still, it stayed with me longer than anything Evan had said that month. At home, Evan called me impressive when I solved problems. Adrian made me feel impressive before I solved them. That was the difference I kept feeding myself. My safe man loved me after the work was done. Adrian looked at me like the work itself made me desirable. By lunch, Tessa noticed. She leaned against my desk with her coffee and asked why I looked like I had won something before noon. I told her Adrian had praised my proposal and she smiled like she already knew the rest. Tessa liked secrets when they were still pretty. She liked being close enough to hear them, but far enough to deny them later. Back then, I did not see that. Back then, she felt like proof that I was not crazy. She told me some women were not built to spend their lives with safe men. I laughed and told her Evan was not that bad. Then I corrected myself without meaning to. I said he was not bad. He was just small. That word sat between us. Small. I should have hated how easy it came out, but I did not. It felt accurate. Evan had started to feel like a man built for emergency contacts, tire pressure, and quiet Sunday mornings. Adrian felt built for rooftops, glass offices, and women who wanted to be envied. The first real line moved during a late client dinner 2 weeks later. Adrian asked me to stay after the others left because he wanted to review the account notes. That was what the calendar said. Account review. It looked clean. It looked harmless. It looked like work. We sat in the hotel bar under amber lights, with 2 folders open between us. He asked about the client for 10 minutes. Then he asked about my marriage. Not directly. Men like Adrian did not need direct questions. He said Evan seemed quiet at the mixer. He said some men did not know what to do with women who kept growing. He said it like he was describing the weather. I told him Evan was a good man. Then I said good was not always enough. Adrian looked at me for a long second and said he understood that more than I knew. That was how it started. Not with some dramatic choice, with one man giving me permission to say what I had already been thinking. After that night, the messages changed. They were still about clients at first, then about restaurants, then about songs playing in hotel lobbies. Then about how certain rooms felt different when I was in them. I deleted nothing because I thought I was too smart to need fear. Of course, I still went home to Evan. I still let him ask if I wanted tea. I still let him put my phone on charge when I fell asleep on the couch. I still let him be my safe man because safety was useful, even when I no longer respected it. The affair became real slowly, then all at once. A longer lunch, a private ride after an event. His hand staying near mine too long on an elevator rail. A door closing behind us during a trip that was supposed to be about a client. I will not dress it up as romance. I wanted him. He wanted to be wanted. That was enough for both of us. For a while I thought we were careful. Adrian had a wife and I had a husband, so we both understood what could be lost. That made it feel more serious to me, not cheaper. A man with everything was taking a risk for me. I turned that into value because I needed it to mean I was valuable. Then I met Miriam Vale. It happened at a company dinner in a private room with dark wood walls and candles that made every glass look expensive. Miriam sat beside Adrian, calm and elegant, wearing a navy dress and no visible effort. That bothered me more than it should have. She did not scan the room to see who looked at her. She did not laugh too loudly. She did not cling to Adrian's arm. She sat like a woman who believed the chair already belonged to her. I decided I hated that. Adrian touched her back once when he introduced her. Then his eyes found mine across the table. One glance. Not long, long enough. I looked at Miriam and decided she was nothing special. Too calm, too plain, too comfortable in a life I had started to imagine for myself. Tessa texted me from the other end of the table and asked if that was the wife. I texted back that some women only win because they arrive first. That night, Evan waited awake again. He did not ask about Adrian first. He asked why I had come home wearing perfume that did not smell like mine. Specific. Factual. Annoying. I told him hotel bathrooms had soaps and sprays everywhere, and if he wanted to inspect me like luggage, he should at least pretend to have a reason. He said he was not inspecting me. He said I had come home twice that month smelling like places I had not mentioned being. I turned it on him because that was easier. I told him jealousy looked ugly on a man who had stopped trying. I said he could not ignore a woman for years and then act shocked when she enjoyed being noticed. He folded his napkin slowly beside the untouched plate he had saved for me. That little movement made me want to be cruel. He said he was trying to understand what had changed. I told him I had changed, and maybe he should catch up. After that, I became bolder. Adrian started giving me access to client calls above my level. He invited me into planning sessions other managers were not allowed to join. When people noticed, I told myself they were jealous because power always makes small people gossip. One afternoon, Evan mentioned Adrian's board partner Graham Lyle while reading something on his tablet. He said Graham had been involved in a compliance dispute years ago and asked if that was connected to our company. For 1 second, it irritated me that Evan knew that name. It did not fit the version of him I liked keeping in my head. Then I dismissed it. Of course he knew boring finance names. That was his whole world. Documents, risk, quiet warnings nobody wanted at dinner. Adrian's world had movement. Mine was finally moving with it. By the end of that month, I had built 2 lives so neatly, I almost admired myself. At home, Evan kept the lights on, the bills paid, and the bed warm. At work, Adrian made me feel like the kind of woman men risked things for. And I convinced myself that was not betrayal. It was balance. By the time the company celebration came, Adrian and I were no longer careful enough to look innocent. Careful people keep distance. We kept finding reasons to stand too close. The event was held in the main celebration hall on the 31st floor, the one with glass walls and gold lights over the bar. The air smelled like champagne, expensive flowers, and perfume people wore when they wanted to be remembered. I clipped my silver corporate badge to my dress even though no one needed badges after 6. I liked how it looked there. It made me feel official. It made me feel chosen. Adrian arrived late, which meant everyone turned when he walked in. That was the kind of man he was. A room did not need to love him to respond to him. It only needed to know he mattered. Evan came with me as my guest. My safe man wore a dark suit and stood beside me with a glass of water in his hand because he said he wanted to drive us home. That was Evan. Even at a party, he found a way to be practical. He asked if I wanted him to take my coat. He asked if my shoes were comfortable. He asked if the music was too loud near the speakers. Adrian asked if I had seen the client from the Meridian account because he wanted me beside him when he spoke to them. See the difference? One man checked whether I was comfortable. The other made me necessary. Of course, I went with Adrian. Across the hall, Tessa watched me with a tight smile. A month earlier, she would have raised her glass and made some little joke about me being the real queen of the firm. That night, she only lifted her eyebrows once and looked away. I told myself she was nervous because people were starting to notice my rise. People were starting to notice something. Adrian had missed 2 client calls that week. He had moved one planning meeting 3 times because he wanted me in it. He had given me access to a private schedule only directors normally saw. I treated all of that like proof of my value. Caroline Pierce treated it like a problem. Caroline was our senior operations director, and she had the kind of face that did not change when other people panicked. She watched invoices, calendars, travel approvals, and weak excuses with the same flat attention. I never liked her much. She made gossip feel unsafe. At the bar, Adrian praised me too loudly. He told a group of managers that the Meridian event had worked because I understood people better than anyone else on the team. He said some employees followed instructions, but I understood instinct. His hand rested near the back of my chair while he said it. I felt Evan behind me before I turned. He had heard enough. He did not interrupt. He did not pull me aside. He only stood there with his water and that quiet face I had started to hate. A co-worker joked that Evan must be proud to be married to the office star. I smiled before Evan could answer. I said Evan was used to supporting me from the background. The laugh that followed was small, but it was there. Small laughs are sometimes worse than loud ones because people can pretend they did not mean anything. I looked at Evan, waiting for some sign that the line had landed. He only looked at me. Then he looked at Adrian's hand near my chair. Then at my badge. Adrian must have enjoyed the silence because he leaned closer and touched the edge of my silver badge with one finger. He said I belonged in bigger rooms than this one. My skin warmed under the badge. That was what I wanted. A man who did not ask if my shoes hurt. A man who saw the size of me. So I turned back toward the group and said some men knew how to make a woman feel like she was standing beside greatness. Then I added that other men only knew how to ask if the car had enough gas. The room shifted. Someone laughed too fast. Someone else looked at the floor. Tessa stopped smiling completely. Evan set his glass down. He picked up the cloth napkin from the cocktail table beside him and folded it slowly, corner to corner. It was such a small, controlled movement that it made me angrier than if he had shouted. He asked quietly if I really wanted to do this here. Not what I was doing. Not why. Here. As if the place was the problem. As if my honesty became ugly only because other people could hear it. I told him maybe public honesty was the only language he understood. I said I had spent years shrinking myself around his comfort, and I was tired of pretending that safe felt the same as alive. His face changed for half a second. Not much. Just enough. He asked if I thought humiliating him made Adrian look better. I should have stopped there. I could have laughed it off. I could have blamed the champagne, the noise, the long week. But Adrian was watching. And Miriam was not. So I smiled at Evan and told him Adrian did not need me to make him look better. He already did that by standing in the room. Nobody laughed that time. That should have told me something. Instead, I treated the silence like respect. Evan nodded once. Not agreement, not surrender. Something colder than both. Then he stepped back and told me he would wait near the elevators when I was ready to leave. I heard defeat in that sentence. Of course I did. I had trained myself to hear defeat in anything that was not pursuit. For the rest of the night, I stayed near Adrian. I let his attention cover me like expensive fabric. I let co-workers see it. I let Evan see it from across the hall, alone near the glass wall, watching the city like the city had better answers than his wife. When Caroline passed me on her way to the restroom, she did not smile. She said Adrian had missed the final approval call with the Lennox client and asked if I knew where he had been. Her tone was polite. Too polite. I told her Adrian trusted me with more because I had earned it. She looked once at Adrian, then at me, then at the badge on my dress. She said trust and distraction were not the same thing. I laughed because I needed her to feel old and bitter, not accurate. After the event, Evan drove us home in silence. I expected questions. I expected wounded speeches. I expected him to finally show me that I had cut deep enough. He did not. At a red light, he asked if Adrian had touched my badge because he meant something by it, or because he liked touching things that were not his. That was his quiet debrief. No raised voice, no insult, just one sentence with too much inside it. I told him he sounded pathetic. He said nothing else. When we got home, he folded the restaurant receipt from the valet stand and placed it in the small tray near the door. He always kept receipts, groceries, parking, repairs, tiny paper proof of ordinary life. I saw a habit, nothing more. The next morning, Caroline's office door stayed closed for almost an hour. Tessa stopped by my desk, started to say something, then only asked if I had sent the Meridian updates. No joke, no sparkle. I watched her walk away and told myself she was scared of my confidence. That was easier than naming what had really happened. People were no longer whispering because they envied me. They were whispering because Adrian had become careless, and I had become proud enough to think carelessness was power. By the end of that week, I had a new plan. I was done letting Evan pretend this was only a phase. I wanted him to see the truth clearly. I wanted him to sit close enough to Adrian to understand what a better man looked like, and if that hurt him, then maybe pain would finally teach him what comfort never could. The first thing that changed was Adrian's timing. He used to answer me fast. Not always with words that mattered, but fast enough to make me feel chosen. A heart on a message. A short line about missing my face in the conference room. A private note after a meeting telling me I had owned the client before they even sat down. Then his replies started coming slower. 20 minutes. An hour. Half a day. Of course I told myself he was busy. Powerful men were busy. That was part of why I wanted him. Evan had time to ask if I needed soup. Adrian had a company, a board, clients, a wife, and still found spaces for me. That made me feel more important, not less. At the office, the air around us had changed. People still spoke to me, but they did it with cleaner edges. Caroline stopped asking casual questions when she passed my desk. Tessa still came by with coffee, but she no longer leaned close like we were girls sharing a secret. She stood straight, checked who was listening, and kept her voice professional. I asked her if she had become afraid of me. She said she was afraid of messy things that reached payroll. That annoyed me because it sounded like Caroline had infected her. I told Tessa some women got scared when another woman finally rose above them. She looked at me for a second and said rising was not the same as being lifted by the wrong man. I laughed. That was easier than asking why her face did not move. The day Miriam learned, I did not know it was that day. I only knew the office went quiet in a strange way after lunch. Caroline's door stayed closed. Adrian cancelled a client review he had insisted was urgent. His assistant walked past me twice without meeting my eyes. I texted Adrian and asked what was happening. He answered late and said, "Not now. Not now." 2 words from a man who used to make me feel like every room had been waiting for me. I stared at the message until the screen dimmed. Then I locked my phone and told myself his wife was probably being difficult. I had seen Miriam at that dinner. Calm women always looked stable until the day they understood they were replaceable. That evening, Evan was different too. Not loud, not angry. Different in the way a locked door is different from a closed one. He was sitting at our dining table with his laptop shut and his phone beside his hand. No food, no plate, only a cloth napkin from the drawer folded into a neat rectangle. My safe man and his little rituals. I asked if he had eaten. He said no. Then his phone lit up. The number had no name, but I saw part of the preview before he turned the screen down. It mentioned Adrian. I felt the thought open in me. Not fully. Just enough. Miriam. For 1 second, the whole picture almost lined up. Adrian's slow replies, Caroline's closed door, Tessa's new caution, Evan's phone, and that unknown number. It almost looked like a shape. Then I pushed it away. Evan was not a man people went to for danger. He was not the man anyone called when something serious had to happen. He was the man people called when they needed a form checked, a tire changed, or calm words during a bad week. So I smiled and asked if one of his boring work people had discovered gossip. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he said someone had finally decided the pattern mattered. That word irritated me. Pattern. He had used it before when he talked about numbers, expenses, and habits. Now he was using it on me like I was a spreadsheet with errors. I asked what pattern. He did not raise his voice. He did not accuse me. He only named small things, one after another. Late nights that had no client notes. Hotel soap. Adrian's messages after midnight. My sudden need to bring my badge home every day like it was jewelry. The way I spoke about him in public and then acted confused when he bled quietly from it. That last part made me angry because it sounded too soft. I told him he was building a sad little case out of normal career pressure. I said if he had put this much attention into being a husband, maybe I would not need other people to see me. He folded the napkin again. One corner, then the other. He asked if Adrian saw me, or if Adrian only liked being seen through me. I hated that question. Not because it was stupid, because it was too close to something I did not want to examine. So I chose the easiest answer. I told him Adrian made me feel like a woman. He made me feel desired, admired, alive. Evan made me feel managed. There was nothing romantic about being managed. He took that without flinching. Then he said he had spent years trying to make sure I never had to worry about the floor under my feet, and I had mistaken the floor for a cage. For a second, I saw him. Not as my safe man. Not as the boring husband beside the soup and receipts. As a person who had been standing there the whole time, holding things I never counted because they did not sparkle. I did not like that version because it made me smaller, so I killed it. I told him floors were useful, but nobody falls in love with a floor. He looked down at the napkin in his hands. That was the real sad moment. Plain. Small. No performance. He looked tired in a way that did not ask me to fix it. I decided it was guilt bait. I told him nostalgia was not a marriage. He said he knew. Just that. He knew. After that, Evan stopped trying to pull answers out of me. He did not ask where I was going the next morning. He did not ask why Adrian's name appeared again on my phone. He did not even look at the dress I chose for work. That silence felt like space. I used it. Adrian came back to me 2 days later with a message that said Miriam wanted dinner. A double dinner. Him and Miriam. Me and Evan. Something quiet. Somewhere private. So everyone could behave like adults. I almost laughed when I read it. Miriam wanted to sit across from me. The woman I had called nothing special wanted to put herself at a table with the woman her husband watched. Of course I accepted. Adrian sounded tense when he called. He said Miriam had been too calm. He said Caroline had spoken to her. He said the company could not afford unnecessary drama. There it was again. Company. Risk. Damage. Men always found formal words when they were scared. I told Adrian Miriam was doing what wives like her did. She was trying to act graceful because she knew anger would make her look replaceable faster. I told him the dinner would help. Once Evan saw us together, once Miriam saw who Adrian truly wanted, everyone would stop pretending. Adrian did not answer right away. Then he said maybe. That maybe should have sounded weak. Instead, I turned it into pressure. He was trapped. He was nervous. He needed me to be strong enough for both of us. At home, Evan was standing near the bedroom doorway when I told him about the dinner. He listened without interrupting. His phone was in his hand, face down. That unknown number had messaged him again. I asked if he was afraid to sit across from Adrian. He said no. I asked if he was afraid to sit across from Miriam. He looked at me then, and for the first time in weeks, I could not read him quickly. He said Miriam understood more than I thought. I hated the way he said her name. Like she was not a background wife. Like she was a person in the room already. So I told him I was glad she understood. Maybe understanding would make the night cleaner for everyone. Evan placed his folded napkin on the dresser, neat as a small white flag. I saw surrender. Nothing more. By the time the reservation was confirmed, I had already chosen what the dinner would be. Not a confrontation. Not an apology. A final demonstration. Evan would see Adrian beside me. Miriam would see she had been replaced. And I would finally sit between the life I had survived and the life I deserved. I treated the dinner like a stage. That morning I stood in front of the bedroom mirror and tried on 3 dresses before choosing the black one. Not too loud, not too desperate. Expensive enough to say I belonged beside Adrian, simple enough to make Miriam look like she was trying too hard if she came overdressed. Of course, I told myself it was not about winning. It was about clarity. Evan watched from the doorway while I fastened my earrings. My safe man did not compliment me. He did not ask who I wanted to impress. He only stood there with that careful face, holding a folded napkin between his fingers, like he had carried silence from the dining room into our bedroom. He asked if there was anything I wanted to tell him before we sat in front of other people. Final and clean. No anger, no begging, one open door. For a second, that almost annoyed me more than a fight would have. He was giving me a chance, as if he still had something to offer. As if honesty from me would be a gift he could afford to receive. I told him there was nothing to confess. Then I gave him the truth I wanted him to choke on. I told him he had made me lonely inside my own marriage. I said he treated reliability like desire, bills like romance, and quiet loyalty like passion. I told him a woman could be protected and still feel untouched. He did not argue, because he could not. That part was true. So I kept going. I told him Adrian made me feel like a woman, not a responsibility. Adrian looked at me like I could change the temperature of a room. Evan looked at me like something to keep safe until morning. There is a difference between a man who protects you and a man who makes you feel alive. Evan lowered his eyes to the napkin, folded one corner, then the other. He said he understood. That was all. I heard surrender. I wanted to hear surrender. Before we left, I texted Tessa a photo of my dress and told her tonight would finally make everyone honest. She did not send flames. No joke. No excited question. Only one short message came back, telling me to be careful. I stared at it for a few seconds, then turned the phone face down. Tessa had always liked my confidence when it was only gossip. Now that it was becoming real, she wanted clean hands. Fine. I did not need her. Adrian called while I was putting on lipstick. His voice was lower than usual. He said Miriam had picked a private room. He said Caroline knew too much. He said maybe we should keep the evening calm. I smiled into the mirror. Men like Adrian always sounded careful before they finally chose. Power had rules, marriages had exits, companies had appearances. I understood that. Of course I did. I told him calm was perfect. Miriam needed to see us together without a crowd to save her pride. Evan needed to see the kind of man he could never become. Adrian went quiet. I decided that quiet meant pressure, not withdrawal, not fear, pressure. When Evan and I got into the car, he did not start the engine right away. He placed the folded napkin in the cup holder, smooth and white under the dashboard light. He said after tonight, he would handle things properly. No details, no threat, just that word, properly. I laughed and told him that was the most Evan thing he could say. Even losing his wife, he wanted to be organised. He started the car. I looked out the window and imagined the table already waiting for us. Miriam on one side, learning she was not enough. Evan on the other, finally understanding that safety had lost to desire. By the time we reached the restaurant, I was calm. Not because I was afraid, because I thought the night belonged to me. The private dining room smelled like lemon water and polished wood. Miriam was already there. So was Evan. For a second, I liked that. It looked right. My safe man on one side of the table, Adrian's calm wife on the other. Two people about to learn they had been replaced by something stronger. Adrian's hand touched my back when we entered, but it did not stay there. I told myself he was being careful. Of course I did. Then Evan stood. He smiled. He picked up the white napkin beside his plate and folded it once, slowly, corner to corner. The same calm little movement. The same weak delay I had mocked for months. Only this time, he did not look weak. He stepped toward Miriam and pulled her into his arms. Not politely, warmly. Then he kissed her. I set my glass down, but my fingers stayed around the stem. My nails clicked once against the glass. Adrian stopped beside me, his face empty of all the power I had borrowed from him. I asked what Evan thought he was doing. I said he was humiliating me in front of my boss. Evan looked at me and said he was only following my rules. Miriam did not move away from him. She said I had wanted her husband, her position, and her life, but I had never understood what held those things together. Then Evan named the pieces I had ignored. Adrian's midnight messages, the hotel soap, the board partner he had asked about, the way Adrian touched my silver badge at the celebration, Miriam's number on his phone, the final chance he gave me before dinner. All of it had been there. I had looked at every clue and called it jealousy, boredom, weakness, paperwork. Miriam placed a slim folder on the table, not with drama, with care. She had Adrian's calendar gaps, hotel charges, deleted messages, and Caroline's complaint about damaged accounts. Evan had my timeline, my lies, the receipts, and the public moments where I made him smaller so Adrian could look taller. Caroline stood near the doorway. I had not seen her enter. She said I did not get to call the mirror uglier than the face. No one laughed. That made it worse. I tried to say Evan and Miriam were no better than us. I tried to say this was planned cruelty, but Nolan, the restaurant manager, only turned to Miriam and asked if she wanted the room cleared. Not me. Miriam. Adrian finally moved. He did not reach for me. He leaned toward Miriam and told her they should speak privately because the company could not take more damage. That was his choice. Not me. The company. Evan said the divorce petition and temporary financial orders would arrive through proper channels. I left the house 2 days later with 2 suitcases and no speech from him. My access to the joint travel card was gone before the weekend. Tessa stopped answering after one message that said she could not be involved. Adrian kept his office door closed and let people speak about me without correcting them. At work, I became less of a rising woman and more of a warning people lowered their voices around. I still think Evan made me lonely. I still think he confused safety with desire and called it love. But Adrian did not choose me because I was rare. He chose me because I admired him, and weak men love mirrors until they show too much. That night, in the small apartment I rented, I found my silver corporate badge at the bottom of my purse. I wanted a man who could make me feel above everyone, and I ended up beneath the woman I called nothing special.